my name is Michelle, and today I'm going to be reading some of my favorite booktubers' favorite books from 2021. So 2021 was like kind of the first year I got into booktube. I started reading again. I took a hiatus when I was in college because I was reading books for college and I didn't want to really read for fun after that. Also, I had a social life, so I started really reading again in 2018, and it's just really increased every year. This year I got really into it, it became my sole personality trait. And I would like to blame Book Talk partially for this, but also I started watching a bunch of booktubers. And so these are a bunch of the booktubers that I watch, and not all of them have the same taste as me. In fact, as I will talk about, some of them have in opposite taste as me. So I went through their favorites videos and picked out a book. For the ones who ranked it, I tried to do the highest book I hadn't read before. So if I had already read their favorite book, I would do their second. But several of these guys were this is unranked. It's just my favorites in a big long list. And then I just picked one that sounded good and quintessentially them. Tried to keep their vibe in mind as I was selecting.
So we're gonna start with my favorite book of the year, the book that just did it all and did it all right. And that one is Know My Name by Chanel Miller.
She reads quite diversely, which I really appreciate because I like to read quite diversely as well. She is in a master's program right now for English, and so she reads a lot of literary stuff. She likes a lot of horror, but she also does a lot of romance and fun, lighter stuff too. This book is Know My Name by Chanel Miller, which is her favorite book of 2021. This has been on my to read list for the entirety of last year. It is Chanel Miller's memoir, and you may know Chanel Miller because she was the Jane Doe in the Brock Turner sexual assault Stanford rape case, and she wrote a memoir about her life and her experience as a survivor of sexual assault and all of that. I'm really looking forward to reading it. I've only heard excellent things about it. I just haven't brought myself to read it because I know it's going to be a little bit heavier, and I wasn't in the headspace for it, but looking forward to reading it.
We're here. My best book of the year. 5 freaking stars. It's A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I listened to the audiobook in November and gave it 4.5 stars. Immediately got the book. Immediately read it again. 5 stars, shooting into the sun. Oh my God.
Next up, I'm reading A Dowry of Blood, which is Katie Colson's favorite. Katie Colson is one of my favorite booktubers. She's a smaller booktuber. She lives in Atlanta, and she reads she does a lot of audiobooks, which is interesting. I don't do a lot of audiobooks, but she also reads quite diversely. She does a lot of fantasy, and this year has been really into fantasy and horror, which has been fun. I've enjoyed following along with her. I feel our tastes overlap but are not exactly the same. But her favorite book was A Dowry of Blood. And I don't have the physical book of this one because my library didn't have it, but it is on Scribd. But Katie was read the physical. And if Katie tells me to read the physical, I for sure will, because she's not a audiobook girl. So if she prefers the physical, I definitely will do physical.
My favorite book of the year, and the one that I'm going to fail in explaining the most, is House of Leaves by Mark C. Danielewski.
Next, I am going to read Kayla's favorite book from last year, which Kayla from Books and Lala. It's House of Leaves. I've already started it because it's intimidatingly long, and it's kind of just a chunker of a book. I've had this book at my house multiple times. I check it out from the library and it goes back and I check it out because I've only heard good things about it, but it is just it's a really intimidating. It's a book within a book about a movie, and I'm just frightened to read it. I've started. It's pretty eerie already, but I can also tell that it's going to be really confusing. So hopefully it's a good time. Yeah.
The next book that I really enjoyed over the summer was One Last Stop.
She reads fun books for the most part, and she hates on the Court of Thorns and Roses series. I think that's what she's famous for, and I really appreciate that. I did, as a Court of Silver Flames super fan, I did thoroughly enjoy her 2-hour rant about how terrible it was. I had fun. I'm not being facetious. I always enjoy her stuff. She is truly hilarious. I was actually watching a video of hers before I started filming. But one of her favorites, I don't think she ranked them, but one of her favorites was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This has been on my to read list as well. Casey McQuiston wrote Red, White, and Royal Blue, and this is her follow-up to that. I mean, they're not the same, but this is her second book. This one follows a girl who falls in love with a girl on the subway, but the girl on the subway is like stuck in the 70s. I think there's like a time warp situation. I don't really know. It's like magic and lesbians. So looking forward to it. The first book I decided to start was House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, this is Kayla's favorite book of the year. I decided to start with it because it's like very intimidating. I figure I'll probably read this book and probably start some of the other ones at the same time. It's on chapter 3. So far, it is... nothing has really happened. House of Leaves is this like book within a book of this man who, it's like a book about a book this man wrote about a movie. And the movie doesn't exist, maybe? I don't know. It's actually been kind of like creepy. I like get eerie vibes from this. I actually do think it's going to scare me. It's a horror book, I think. And yeah, like I said, I'm like 20 pages in. So far nothing has really happened. This man has moved into this house, and then there's like footnotes from this other man, the man writing the book about the book, and he is like, one time my hot water heater went out, and actually it wasn't their hot water heater, it was their heater. I added water because I thought it would be better, and that's all that's happened so far. So that's that. Wanted to give quick updates for where I'm at in all of the books I've started, 3 of them. I always read a bunch of books at a time, so this is like very typical for me. House of Leaves, I am 150-ish pages in. If you know House of Leaves, this book is crazy, and I've also read like a ton of the appendices at this point. This book is wild and weird. At this point, what is even going on? So they're in... I don't know what's going on. So we've got like 2 plot lines. This was like very hard to get into. I feel like I'm finally getting into the good part of the book. It's also where it's starting to go a little bit crazy. But we've kind of got 2-ish storylines that we're following. We've got Johnny, and we've got like the family with the house. And the family with the house storyline is super, super interesting. Johnny is unhinged, and so sometimes it's hard to stay engaged in his sections because he's a crazy man. It's also kind of hard to determine like what I actually need to read and what is okay to like skip, what's just there for like the vibes, because there's like very, very long lists sometimes of like locations. And when I say long lists, I mean lists that span like multiple pages that just list locations. I'm confused by it. How do I feel? I don't know. I did get really scared last night. I had to pee in the middle of the night, and I had to walk into a dark hallway, and I thought of this book and I was a little bit frightened. One last stop. I was going to save this one, and then I wound up starting it because I knew I was going to like this one. This has been on my to-read list since it came out. I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue, so I knew I was going to like this one. I'm like halfway through, like I said. I'm on page 200. It's really good. It's a fun time. It's really charming. I just read the Easter brunch scene, which was super cute. Okay, I'm getting very close to the end. I just finished chapter 14. I'm crying again. I just wanted to illustrate how often I cry. I think I mentioned it in that video where I tier ranked all the books I cried, but like I wasn't joking. Anyway, I'll update you when I'm finished. I think I have like 50 pages left. I just finished One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. My dogs are barking. Am I wiping away tears? Yeah. Rom-coms make me cry every time. Is this a rom-com? I don't know. It's a romance novel. What are my thoughts on this book? It was good. I enjoyed it. It was a good time. It reminded me a lot of The Love That Split the World. Not just in there was like a weird time rift situation, but you know I love an Emily Henry, so like that's always a good thing. I feel like Casey McQuiston is brilliant at doing pop culture references in a way that is not grating. I feel like pop culture references can very easily become grating just because they go out of style so quickly, and novels take a while to get from like your fingers into readers' hands, so oftentimes they can feel dated already. But I feel like she does it in a way that feels like a time capsule rather than something that is outdated. I still think I like Red, White, and Royal Blue, her other book, a little better than this one, but this one is really good. The girlies are so sweet. I mean, the setting is slightly less interesting. The prince and the first son is just like a dynamic. I mean, this girl's trapped in a time warp, so I guess that's like pretty interesting, but she's not the prince of England or the princess of England, and that's not her fault. I also haven't lived in New York, and I think, from what I've heard, people who live in New York find a little bit more value in this because it like really does a good job of talking about the like New York experience of being a part of a community, but also being grumpy and by yourself. Dowry of Blood, I'm like 70 pages in. I have an ebook version, but I think that's like about a third of my ebook. I don't know how to feel about A Dowry of Blood. The writing is really interesting. It's written really beautifully, but also I kind of feel like there's not really a plot maybe. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not disliking it, but I like also don't know where to place it. I think that's my problem. I like don't know where to place it. It's not like Carmen Maria Machado like literary horror fully, but it's also not like reading like a Stephen King where you're not really reading for the words, you're just reading for the story. Okay, I wanted to give a quick update. I did finish Dowry of Blood last night. My thoughts were confused. I don't know about this book. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. That makes it sound terrible. No, I like enjoyed it. I thought the writing, I found the plot to not be super compelling, which had me putting it down a lot, which I think was to its detriment. I think it was a book that should have been read a little faster than I read it. I also think that sometimes the writing overtook the story in a way that was a little strange. It like didn't know whether it wanted to be a plot-based book or this is like very critical. I gave it 4 stars. I like enjoyed it, but I like don't know. I'm trying to understand why it was not 5 stars. I think the language sometimes overtook the story, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm looking at the viewfinder. Okay, I want to talk about this book. This book, I'm here on what page am I on? 399, and there are like 550 pages in the like actual book, and then there's like appendices, which I've read a lot of already, and I like hate it. I like hate it a lot. Like, I think everyone who has told someone else to read this, like, maybe involved in like a Ponzi scheme, like a pyramid scheme, because despite the fact that like the story is like quite interesting, like I'm very interested in the story of this house. You know what? I've even like grown to like have a fondness for Johnny, our guy in the footnotes. This book is like 50 pages of good story surrounded by 350 pages of either like unhinged, incomprehensible rambling, like lists of things that make literally no sense, and dense scholarly text. And I'm just like confused why people love this so much, and I'm gonna finish it because I'm so close to the end, and at this point I've committed too many hours not to, but I do feel like this is like a Ponzi scheme. Like, part of me thinks that maybe at the end of this book there's like a it follows the Ring situation where unless you like pass this on to someone else, like something bad will happen to you, because why are people recommending this to other people? Anyway, seems like a little aggressive against Kayla, this was her favorite book of last year, but I'm feeling a little aggressive. It's due back to the library today. Last night I was gonna try to finish it, and I read like 5 pages, and then I was like, I'm gonna die if I have to keep reading this. I hate this so much. And so, you know what I did? I'm just deciding there's a wait list because other people want to be suffering, and so I can't renew it, so I'm just gonna keep it and accrue the fines and like spend the weekend finishing it up. But I hate it. I hate it so much. And like I said, it's like not like the story is inherently like terrible the whole time through. There's like a really interesting story about this house and like all the crazy things that are in the house, and like sometimes I get very invested. It's like a very immersive story, and the story is very interesting, but I think it's just like not my style of horror. Like, I like to be spoon-fed my spooks. Like, I want to read a Stephen King book where he like lays everything out, you forget you're reading. I never forget I'm reading this, except when I'm staring at the wall because I'm not reading the words anymore, because Johnny's unhinged ramblings are really hard to follow. There will be like 2-page long sentences. I'm not joking. Like, I love a good long sentence, but like this boy be writing 2-3 page long sentences, and I am just not here for it. It's not for me. Maybe I'll change my tune when I finish it, but at this point, no, not at all for me. So I finished House of Leaves over the weekend. And I would have made an update about it yesterday, but the day had an unexpected turn. A crazy turn that I cannot speak about yet. I have a super secret project. Like, I'm a fancy YouTuber, even though I am my only subscriber. Actually, I have another one out there. I really believe that I'm not both of my subscribers. I think I'm only one of them. Anyway, I have a secret YouTuber project. It's not a YouTuber project. No one wants to work with me. I literally get like less than 10 views. Like, I don't know if I've broke. I did break double digits on my little life video. So, professional now. Anyway, I read House of Leaves over the weekend. I hated it. And that's like the short answer. The long answer is I feel complicated about it. But like hate it is the overwhelming answer. So I really actually enjoyed parts of it. And I was confused by it. I didn't feel like I was approaching it right. After I read it, I like went on Kayla's live stream where she talked about it with a couple other people. And she explained why she liked it. And I think we had like the same, I was expecting her to have like a very different experience of the book. Like I felt like I did a bad job and had a bad experience of the book because I didn't like understand what was happening. But I actually don't think that's true. I think I had the same experience Kayla did. Kayla just enjoyed it and I did not enjoy it. I think for me, when I like give a book 5 stars, when I love a book, it is because I have an emotional connection to it. Like I'm more an emotional reader than an intellectual reader. And I definitely didn't have an emotional reaction to House of Leaves. People are like, I was like screaming, crying, throwing up while reading this. And I was like, I got scared a few times. Like there were definitely some like scary moments, but I wasn't like really all that emotionally invested in the narrative. And I also think Kayla talked about how she read it and I wish I would have read it that way. Sort of. Because I think one of the cool things was these things that like call back to previous footnotes in a way that you like are like, oh, I have a memory of this. And for me, because the narrative was so disjointed, there were a lot of times where I was like, I think I know about this, but I like couldn't place where it was from. And most of the time it was from earlier in the text. And that was like pretty interesting. But Kayla read it all the way through, like the Navidson record, all the way through, and then went back and did footnotes. And then some other people read like each chapter all the way through and then went back and did footnotes. And then I just read this piece and then I did the footnote and like went back and forth, and it's very choppy that way. So I think perhaps I could have read it better. But anyway, alas, I didn't like it. I do think this book took like an extreme amount of work. Sometimes I would like just think about like how much work must have gone into creating this text, and like that's admirable. But just because you work on something a lot doesn't mean I have to like it or like appreciate your work. Sometimes you work on stuff and it's not great. Okay, I'm not saying this is like objectively terrible, but I had a bad time. Will not be rereading. Probably watch 5 years. They'll pull these tapes out and be like, you reread it and you loved it. And I would be happy if that happens. But I just don't foresee it happening. It was a lot of time for like really just like an average story. Good average. Like some of those parts in the Navidson record were like very engaging, but just like not worth the time commitment to get there. On the other hand, I did start Know My Name by Chanel Miller a couple nights ago. I think I've been reading for like 2 days. I'm on page 59 and it is stunning. This has been on my to read list since it came out. Like everyone is like, you must read this. It's so good. So it was on my to read list, but I'd been putting it off because I thought it would be just like super bleak. And I mean, it's not like an uplifting book, but the way Chanel Miller writes, it doesn't feel like she is just like, it doesn't feel like torturous to read. It feels very much like talking to a friend. She writes it very like approachably. It is not like a struggle to get through it all. It's like very readable, even though the topic is difficult. I'm like really enjoying, doesn't necessarily seem like the right word, but I'm finding the reading experience to be good, very like immersive in a good way. Unlike House of Leaves, which I think is immersive in a bad way. We're gonna do a wrap up for our Booktuber favorites. So I finally finished Know My Name by Chanel Miller this morning, actually. But final thoughts was that book was truly incredible, like so brilliant. I had been both wanting and putting off reading Know My Name for like since it came out. So I think at this point a year and a half, because I knew it was gonna be heavy. I knew what it was about. I remember when the Emily Doe, Chanel's victim impact statement, went viral on the internet. I remember reading that. I was just freshly graduated from college when it came out on the internet, and I remember that being really impactful, and I just like wasn't sure if I was prepared to kind of deal with the level of trauma that was contained in that book. But it did really read like you were talking to a friend. Chanel's story, unfortunately, is not all that uncommon. I mean, the specifics are unique to her, like it is her story, but in a lot of ways it is just like a story that is incredibly pervasive on college campuses across America. A lot of stories that young women have across the country and across the world that sound very similar to Chanel's, and Chanel's story was told in a way that it felt like you were talking to a friend. It wasn't, I mean, it's a hard story, it was hard to get through, but it didn't feel like we were being dragged through and like forced to endure something. It felt very much like a gift, like we were privileged in being able to share this story and this burden with Chanel. It was gorgeous, it was amazing, clearly 5 stars, awesome. I wanted to kind of reflect. I don't remember what I've recorded and what I haven't. This is my first vlog, and it took way longer than I thought it would because I've got a super secret project that I'm working on. So let me go through all of them and kind of my thoughts and my reflections and maybe like what this says about like my taste compared to the Booktubers taste that I read from. The first book I finished was Cindy's, withCindy's, one of her favorite books from 2021. One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I knew I was going to enjoy this book. I like love a rom-com. Like I love a bad rom-com. I love a good rom-com. Like I prefer a good one, obviously. And I think this one was like really good and fun. It was like very like a New York City focused story. I really liked August, our main girlie. It was really fun. I appreciate the fact that Cindy had such like a fun favorite pick. I think sometimes people like stray away from like the fun picks unless they're like a purely romance reader or like a purely for fun reader, but I think sometimes people who read like a little bit more diversely like hesitant to put these fun books on their like favorites list because, you know, they're not as like important. And I like really appreciate that she was like, this book was a good time and I was here for it, and I also had a good time and was here for it. The next thing I finished was Katie Colson's favorite from 2021, and that was A Dowry of Blood. I talked a little bit about how kind of like confused I was about my feelings about this because it was so differently written than I was accustomed to. Just like a very unique writing style. I think it was really enjoyable, but I'm still kind of like, I just like don't know where to put it in my head. And sometimes I think with books that like don't go in the right boxes, we have a harder time like giving them higher ratings because we're just like, we don't know what to do with them. And I definitely felt that way about A Dowry of Blood. But overall, like really engaging, interesting story, had fun. I find Katie and I have like similar, if not the same tastes, if that makes sense. So there's like a lot of overlap, but like Bunny was not for me. Also, Mona Awada is like a significantly better writer than I am, but like too confused. Like I don't love a book that's super heady. That's like kind of what I've learned, and I really learned that in my next book, which I read, which was Kayla's favorite from 2021, Books and Lala, which was House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielitsky. He's a mouthful of a name. I think for me what this really showed me was like, I just like a book that is just like really in your head, really like a thinking man's book, if you will. It's just not for me. Like I love an emotional book. Not that I don't love like a well-written like smart book, because I think that there are well-written and smart books I like, but I need that emotional layer, and that was missing for me in House of Leaves in the vast majority of the book. I just like didn't feel that emotional connection, and for that I wasn't able to excuse kind of the like slog it was to get through, because like, honey, it was a slog. The last book I read was Know My Name by Chanel Miller, which was Noelle Gallagher's favorite book from 2021. I think Noelle and I have the most similar reading habits overall. Maybe not. I feel like we have a lot of books in common. She likes a romance book. I love a romance book. She also like likes a little bit more literary stuff, and I also enjoy that, kind of in a mixed bag situation. I feel like my tastes are like pretty diverse. Like I'll read almost anything. I tend not to be the biggest fan of historical fiction in terms of like quantity, but the ones I do wind up picking up, I tend to enjoy. But it's not something I want to read regularly, but like I love a good fantasy. especially a fantasy written by a lady. I love a thriller, I love a horror book, I love a romance, I love literary fiction. Like, I'm pretty diverse in my tastes. And I feel like Noelle kind of shares some level of that diversity, although she doesn't do fantasy. And like, you know, I'm a Sarah J. Maas girly. Sometimes I wish I was a Sally Rooney girly, but I'm not. I need those quotation marks. So anyway, those are my final thoughts on my first ever book vlog. There will be a part 2 coming soon where I go through Jack Edwards, Carly from UnCarly, and Chandler Ainsley. And they have different book tastes. Carly is like a Sally Rooney girly. So we'll see what I think about her favorite. Jack, you know, he loves a Taylor Jenkins Reid, so mad respect for that. Like, if you love Taylor Jenkins Reid, I think we could get along. But he tends to be like a little less interested in plot than I am. And then Chandler Ainsley and I have like actual opposite tastes. She reads like a lot of romance, and if I love a romance book, Chandler's gonna hate it. And if I hate a romance book, Chandler will likely love it. Sometimes we have some overlaps, but like, we have very opposite tastes. But she has the most beautiful hair on YouTube. Period. And full stop. And that's why I continue to watch her. Also, she's like a fun time. But we definitely don't have similar tastes. The book I'm picking up from her is not a romance though, so I have high hopes for it. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, so if you are interested in that, or we've got some other fun videos coming out, I promise. This week has, in the last week, past 2 weeks, have been literally insane. I'm sure you, my 2 subscribers who are not myself, don't care a ton. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to announce something about that really soon. I'm very excited about the secret project. It is a very cool secret project. But that's kind of in a lull for now. So hopefully videos will be coming out more regularly. We're trying. This is not how I anticipated 2022 going, and so I hadn't planned accordingly. We'll be better in the future. Pinky promise, you should subscribe, you should call up your friend on one of those rotary phones. I've never dialed one and I've always wanted to, so if you have one, or if you can find one, take the opportunity, dial up a friend on the rotary phone, and then tell them to watch this video. And they should subscribe too. Now we're in a pyramid scheme. Maybe I need to offer you money. I think if you just tell another person a recommendation, I don't think that's a pyramid scheme. That just makes you an influencer. You're a micro-influencer. What more could you want from life than to be a micro-influencer? Anyway, I will see you later. Talk to you later. Bye.